Thank you, Susan. So welcome everyone to this core seminar series, Research Tool and Processes. Today, we're going to be discussing about collection and quality of research data. The group who's going to be talking with us is the CORE, which is a newly formed platform at the CORE. CORE stands for Capture and Optimization of Research Data. It's been spun off about a year ago. And it works closely also with the Maelstrom Research teams. And both of them will present some questions to be addressed and challenges that are faced while you develop questionnaires and CRF. And they will also present minimal steps to be implemented to assess data quality prior to start the analysis. So just to give you a little bit of background, at the Research Institute, Isabel Fortier ensured the scientific leadership of the core unit, and she's also the PI leading the Maelstrom Research platform. Objective of both those platforms is to offer resources to the RI community and in terms of expertise, methods, and softwares, and also to facilitate data collection and analyzation. Isabel also works with Rita, Wissa, which is also the Director of Operation of Maelstrom, Anouar, Director of Data Management and Harmonizations team, and finally we have Lovemine, Jeannot, whom is the Project Manager at CORE. So they be both presenting conjointly for this presentation. And if you have any question, you can either put them in the chat or wait at the end. So without further ado, Isabel, I'm giving you the mic.
Thanks. As you mentioned, Dominique, it will be a kind of a collaboration for the presentation between the four of us. But just to mention that each part of the presentation could be a presentation in itself, but we will try to provide a general overview of the challenges and the what not to do as well. So I'll let Rita start the presentation.
Great.
Wait. Oh. I'm not able to change the.
Okay, no.
Okay. Oh, slide.
Sorry. Okay, so every research project begins with an idea. So you have an amazing idea, you gather your troops, you write proposals, you apply for funding, and then congratulations, you've received funding. Now you need to implement this project, meaning starting the setting up the operational framework of the project, which means defining the sources and the information that you'd like to generate or collect, develop the tools that you'll need to collect that information, develop the data management and the warehousing infrastructure. And then once you're comfortable with the infrastructure that you've set up, piloting the infrastructure set up, testing that the data is giving you what you expected, so that now once that you have your infrastructure ready for collection, you move on to the production phase. During the production phase, that's when you'll be collecting all the information that you've defined and or extracting information from existing resources, putting all that information together, ensuring the quality of all that information, preserving these data sets for long-term use of the data, and all the related documentation, because your project needs to be reproducible. Now that it's ready for analysis, we're all very familiar with the analysis phase. You'll explore the data, run the analyses, and depending on how good of a job you did in collecting quality data, your project will reach full potential and have a great impact and change the world, publish a bunch of papers and scientific reports, or not. So having said that, at what point during all these steps should you be thinking about your data? It's a follow the stars. At every step, there's a star, because at every step, you should be thinking about the quality of your data. That's the next slide, please. Here's an example of a project. We did speak of this project in the last presentation that we did for the course seminars, but that was more axed on data management. So I won't speak so much on the structure. Today, we'll focus more on the quality. So first of all, the Better Project has 3 objectives. So to provide a portrait of the population with type 1 diabetes in terms of demographics, life behaviors, treatments, and other aspects. Actually, they've expanded to not just Quebec, but that's very recent, to measure the frequency and severity of hypoglycemic episodes and to evaluate the potential of new technologies and therapies to prevent hypoglycemic episodes. To date, there are over 2,300 participants. Over 2,000 of them are 14 years of age or older. And a little over 300 are under 14 years old, meaning that the parents are the ones who fill up the questionnaires. And once they turn 14, they're invited to join the study as adults. In terms of the structure of the data, it seems quite simple. Core data collected across all participants and some additional information that's collected for a subgroup of the participants. So what does it take to build, in this case, a registry of patients with type 1 diabetes? So what it takes is the team has to discuss all related information to managing confidential data, reviewing the questionnaires to ensure the optimization of the long-term management of the data, implementing the questionnaires in this case in REDCap, constructing the data management infrastructure, so the extraction of the data, cleaning, maintenance, and updates of the database. And finally, creating subsets for research purposes, so for granted users. But I just want to put a bit of emphasis on reviewing the questionnaires specifically. When we mean validate the questionnaires, it's not just about developing a questionnaire. It's really about understanding the information that needs to be captured and defining how to collect that information for it to make sense in terms of data. So here we're thinking of questions in terms of variables. Next slide, please. So in the course of the project, if you recall, the third objective was to evaluate the potential of treatments and therapies. So sometimes there are new treatments on the market. And in this case, we've had to modify the questionnaire to capture the effects of a new treatment. So what does that mean in terms of data? Could we simply add a category? So if there's a variable, what treatments are you currently taking, and add the new treatment as a category? Again, what does that mean in terms of data? That would mean that for the first X participants who responded, that treatment wasn't available to them. So there would be a lot of missing values for this treatment because only the last 100 participants had access to it. We would overestimate the use of other treatments. And so every step of the way, again, you have to think of what it means for your data structure and the meaning of the quality of your data. So in this case, we can't simply add a category to an existing variable. We would have to create a new variable with all the necessary categories and keep them separate in order not to overestimate the usage of other treatments, for example. And every step of the way, it means revalidating the questionnaires, retesting the infrastructure, making sure that everything is up to a good standard. Next slide, please. So how to manage your data. First of all, you take a deep breath, keep calm and manage your data. So in this case, we do periodic exports of the registry. So we extract data every 4 to 6 months. And every data release means validating the list of participants included to make sure that we exclude the participants that asked not to participate anymore. Make sure that there aren't any duplicates. Make sure that we're not including participants who haven't completed their questionnaires yet, meaning that they won't be part of this release, they'll be part of the next release. We have data coming from different sources, so merging the English and French questionnaires, if that's the case, consolidate all the data coming from the different sources, run quality checks. So we'll go into detail, that's the whole point of the presentation. But for example, predetermine validation rules and cross-checking these variables according to those rules every release to make sure that the values that are present respect the rules that were determined. We generate some derived variables. It's not always possible to capture everything in REDCap. Some of the derived variables need to be calculated through several steps. So that's done outside of the collection tool. And then finally, generating quality reports. In that phase, in that step, usually we can contact patients again to make sure that that was the value that they intended on entering or not. But at that point, we need to make sure that all the values respect the conditions that were determined, and that we have the documentation to add to the tables that are finally generated for research purposes.
Okay, so Rita just gave an example of what the team goes over, the different activities that we have to do when it comes to ensuring the quality of data during and before, during a research project such as better. So now I'm gonna circle back a little bit to the implementation phase when you're just planning or designing your data collection instrument. Next slide, please. Okay, so something to really keep in mind as you are developing and designing your case report form and your questionnaire is to really take the time to define what your research question is and what are your objectives. You also want to think about how, when those questionnaire or those case report form will be administered. And as you are starting to get an idea or a picture of what it looks like, it is a good idea to create a diagram so that you can help visualize what the collection structure should be looking like for your research project. And if possible, have a table with your schedule of events so you know that for each visit, these are the questionnaire or CRF that needs to be completed for each visit. And also, you need to have a key information of what is it that you need to answer your question. So it is why it's very important to have that research question defined first and foremost, because this is what's gonna inform you on what information you need to collect and potentially what other variable that you have not been thinking about. For example, confounding factors or information that might be essential to help you interpret certain data that you plan on collecting. For example, if you are going to be collecting glucose level, what would be important is to also know when was the last time the patient had a meal. So those type of information, once you have the raw information, you can start working on refining what are the data item that you are going to use for your final data capture. And I have some examples of what you can use as selection criteria. For example, you look at reliability, validity of the data item. You ask yourself, is that data item is something that's really gonna help me address my research question? And also you wanna think about the time that it's gonna take, because the more data that you collect, the more it's gonna cost you in terms of analysis. So these are certain selection items that can help you make that decision. And also, you can also explore if there's standards available for the information that you're planning on collecting, what's out there that you could use for your research project. And finally, once you have the raw information, you can start creating a first draft of your research, your questionnaire or your CRF. Next slide, please. So throughout this process, once you have that first draft, it is always a good idea to have that document tested. So you want to circulate that among your research team, your statistician, your person who's going to be doing the data entry, or even a patient participant, a patient partner, so they can give you that feedback from the perspective of somebody who has to provide you with that data, or somebody who has to collect it, or somebody who has to analyze. So once you get those feedback, you modify as required, and it could be that this part where you will have multiple iteration of that process until you're able to generate a final version. So now there is the possibility of implementing those CRF or questionnaire in a electronic data capture platform such as RECAP. Even then, it's a good idea to test that electronic version to get a sense, okay, what does it look like when I have to actually collect that in RECAP, for example. Again, you go through the same process. If you had a paper version, you circulate that among your research team and get their feedback and modify as necessary until everybody has decided this is the version that we are going to use to capture world data. And then you move that instrument into production to capture world data. At this point, there are no modifications to be made on that document unless, as Rita mentioned earlier, it could be that there is new medication available that you want to capture. And at this point, you stop and go over the whole process and then you move back to production. So now I'm gonna pass it over to Isabel, who's gonna tell you a bit more what you can keep in mind as you're working on your CRF contents.
Yeah. So what not to do and what are the challenges often faced? So here what you see are a couple of examples of real questions that have been asked in different questionnaires. The first one, how many people in your household live in your household? It can be a good question. The problem with that is that it is not specified if it's including or not the person answering to the questionnaire. So what we found there is that someone could write how many person live in your household, and it's one. But when we crossed with the do you live with other people or not, what we found is that for some people where we had one there, they were not living with someone else, so it was just them. But for others where they wrote that they were living with someone else, it was written one as well. So it was not possible to truly know if the person included himself or herself in the number written. So that is one of an example. It needs to be really precise what you're looking for. Same thing with the birth rank, for example. You need to specify if it's including yourself or not. Another example is the addition of many variables in the same question. So here you have the pain and breast, no, right, left, and you. You have several variables there. You have, do you have pain in breast, yes or no? You have, if yes, is it right or left or both? And if right, is it new? If left, is it new or old, pain that existing a long time ago? So it's really important to ask one question at the time, not to combine several answers in one specific question. Here you have another example with the quantity of number of hours, where you have categories that include the same numbers. So here you have 2 to 5 hours, and here 5 to 10 hours, 10 to 15. So I can want to say 5 and click here, or in the first category, or want to say 5 and here and click in the second category. So it's really important to ensure that each category is completely independent. Another example of problems is the family income before taxes. The categories, again, are, there is no overlap, but what we found is that majority of the population was in the category 4. So more than half of the population in that study was in the 4th category. So it was not, that limited our capacity to refine the analysis on the income. and be able to have, so we should have had more categories of 40 to 60, or I don't know, 40 to 60, 60 to 80s, etc. Another thing that you see here as well is the addition of the prefer not to answer and don't know, which is always a good, not always, but often a good idea to add additional categories if the person, particularly for information about income or more sensitive information, for the participant to be able to say, I don't know, or I prefer not to answer. It's better than to have just a missing and don't know if the answer was not collected, the information was not collected at all, or if the person didn't want to answer. Another example here is the famous open text. Always, please avoid having open text. What is your job title? You have everything there. So how will you transform that everything? I work with my brother as in our I don't know, yeah, or whatever. So it's really difficult to recode open text generally. So if you can, always have a series of categories and other, and when you have the other, you can have an open text there, but avoid to just collect openly everything. And then you have the very messy categories. In the example here, they are asking, are you currently employed? Yes, working full-time. Yes, working part-time. Yes, but I'm on parental leave, and for how long? No, unemployed. No, I'm a student, and other. But they are different, you know, it's not clear. You can be, for example, a student and work part-time, but there was just one selection possible here. So it's really important. Again, I think the problem here is a little bit like for the breast and pain. You have too much information in that question. So do you work full-time, part-time? Should be one question. Are you a student or whatever? It can be another one. Are you in parental leave? It's another information, but it's all in one big chunk, and that is generally lead to more difficulties for the participant to answer the question. The last example in the slide is the time. So whatever you ask, since January 2022, did you blah, 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 or in the last 3 months, did you blah, blah, blah. If your question is since January 2020, but you're recruiting participant through 6 months, so the first participant will have 3 months between January and the time he answered, but the last one will have 3 months plus 6 months because it's a collection over 6 months. So you need as well to think about those things, probably in that case, I would have prefer in the last 3 months instead of a specific date. So another example as well is the change of information through time. In the example here, what you have is the 3 wave of collection, the baseline, first follow-up of the participant and second follow-up of the participant. At baseline, they add several variables and asking about type of cancer. So first type of cancer, check which one. Second type of cancer, check which one. Yeah, the second wave of collection, what they put is the check all. So just one question, but check breast and colon and kidney or whatever. And at the last phase of collection, they had breast, let's say, and yes, no, colon, yes, no. So a true, firm yes or no for each. But putting that together is very difficult. And there are many reasons. I don't have time to pass through all of the details, but just to mention the famous yes, no versus the check. In that current case, at the last follow-up, it's easy to know if the participant answered the question and said, no, I never had breast cancer, or yes, I ever had breast cancer. But here at the first follow-up and the baseline, it's just a check. But sometimes there was no information at all, and it was difficult to do the difference between missing values. So the question was not answered at all versus there is no check because the person never had any of the cancer. So it can be sometimes a good idea to put firm yes or no, but it takes more time to answer. So again, there is no perfect or gold standard, but those are things that you need to think about when you develop a questionnaire. And we are talking about a lot about questionnaires, but that is absolutely the same thing for CRF. And here you have an example of a CRF with the duration of alcohol, duration of stroke. Probably here in the second example, here it's the onset perhaps, or when that happened, while in the alcohol is the total number of years, or I don't know. So it's, when you see that, you will not have information that will be solid enough to support a lot of analysis. But even if you have good questionnaires, even if you have good questions, it's not always obvious to select the right measure. Here you have an example of the two questionnaire of physical activities. So the same questionnaire, but a short and a long form. And you see that the distribution, the long form, it's the blue, and the short form of the same questionnaire about the level of physical activity, the distribution of participants are different. So collecting information with the short form will not give you the same level of physical activities as collecting the information with the long form. So which one is the best? Short is faster, but long is perhaps more precise, so it's not always obvious to find the answers. Same thing, we can take the example of ethnicity, where we did a little survey across 35 studies, looking at the way they were collecting ethnicity. Some were collecting ethnicity for the participant, but sometimes it was the partner, family members. Some collected ethnicity just once, some several times through the follow-up of the participant. And the number of variables varied from 1 to 700 to define ethnicity. And they use different constructs. Sometimes it was ethnicity, sometimes it was more than 50%, but sometimes it was race, the country, area of birth, origin of ancestors, etc. So it can be, that doesn't mean the information collected is not good, but it can be very heterogeneous. And again, we do not have one standard on how to collect ethnicity. Here you have a different example of the ways the information was collected. So the wording of the question that were different from one study to the other. But the categories as well were really different from one study to the other. So where is the truth? How to collect information about ethnicity? Sometimes there are standards that we can use. But often these standards, if we take the Statistic Canada standard, they have like tons of questions with categories, very complex information is collected. Yes, it's a recognized way to collect information, but it's not necessarily the right measure in the clinic or in your specific context. So Something that I would like to see happen one day is to try to internally at core to suggest some ways to standardize a little bit or facilitate the implementation in REDCap or other software of common way to collect information, not one way. Obviously, each project is totally independent and can do whatever they want, but to try to refine a little bit and try to avoid too much heterogeneity. So just to keep in mind, we could talk about that for hours, but to keep in mind that when you develop your questionnaire or CRF, always keep in mind that you need to collect information that you will want to analyze. So think about you analyzing your data and what are the specific variables you will need to analyze that data, and make sure that what you collect is aligned with that. And make sure as well that what you collect is as easy as possible for the person entering the information. And now I will pass the mic to Anouar that will tell you a little bit about quality control.
Thanks. So I will present you different steps of validation before
Anouar,
doing.
you will need to speak louder.
Oh, yeah. So I will present you different steps of validation before doing data collection, but also after data collection. Next slide, please. So there are very simple ways to prevent errors before, during, and after data collection. So before data collection, there is the possibility to limit some errors by specifying some parameters in your data collection software. So for example, if you are using REDCap, you can specify limits, minimum and maximum for continuous variable, so that the participant can avoid indicating that is 3 meters tall. You have also the possibility to integrate skip patterns during the implementation of the questionnaire on all the online CRF. For example, a male cannot answer the question, are you currently pregnant? So if this question is conditioned by the sex variable, when the sex variable equal to male. So before initiating the data collection, it is also important to implement 2 different questionnaires that will allow to validate the inclusion criteria first for the participant, and to allow also the participant to give his agreement to participate in the study. So the eligibility questionnaire will be used to confirm the decision of whether people are eligible to participate in a study. So once data collection is initiated, it is also important to validate the data being collected. So you can do this by going through the variable and assessing the data to make sure that your conditions on the questions or limiting posed are still valid. And if there is an error in the question, an adjustment should be made in the questionnaire. So it is important to make checks at the beginning, just to make sure that you have time to adjust your questionnaire. And if a variable that is important for to the research question has not been collected, it is important to realize this quickly before it's too late, and adjust the questionnaire during data collection. So next slide, please. So after finalizing the data collection, it is necessary to validate the collecting data through different validation steps. So here is an example of the steps you can use to validate your data set. So I will go through each item. So the first thing I do when I'm validating a data set, I will verify first the list of IDs. So I will verify the list of identifier that can either directly identify an individual or link an individual to their identity. And it is very important to check that the data do not contain duplicates IDs, because it is possible that the questionnaire was administered to the participant twice. And additionally, it is also necessary to validate that the participant meet the inclusion criteria. So the inclusion criteria depend on your research question, and it can be anything. Here, for example, the age and sex were mandatory. So if the sex and age values were missing, then the participant was excluded from the study. So the next step consists of verifying that the data collected correspond to the information included in the data dictionary. So in the data dictionary, we have all the metadata that describe the information in your data set. So you will have to check your data dictionary and verify, for example, if the categories of the variable are indicated, and you have to check and make sure that all the metadata are clearly documented in the data dictionary. And for example, for continuous variable, you can verify that the value are numerical, so integer or decimal, and not text. So then I will generate invariant distribution for all variables, and I will identify potential input errors, for example, the outliers, the missing value, or I will check if there are confidential values. So after that, I will generate cross-references across variable. So the step consists of verifying that the participant have answered the questionnaire logically. So, for example, a participant who reports being a male cannot report a pregnancy. So it is just a process of cross-tabulating some variables to ensure that the data is logical. And so at the end, after checking step 1 to 4, these steps consist of correcting the information and gather all the information and values corrected, and document all the remaining issues. So next slide, please. So I will show you now 2 examples of issues I found in dataset when I was validating a dataset. And this is just to show you that the application of simple validation steps can avoid this type of errors. So here the question was asked to the participant, and it was, have you ever been pregnant? So there were approximately 15,000 male in the data set. But when I cross-referenced the information on the sex and pregnancy variable, I found that 147 men answered yes to this question. So when I asked the cohorts why, they realized that the invitation email had been sent to the participant, but this one shares a common email with his partner or wife. So at the end, the decision was to delete the values of 177 participants, but it is possible that there are still potential issues. So next slide, please. So the second example will concern the sitting 8 variables. So here, this information has been collected by several studies in a prospective way, but when the sitting 8 values was compared, it was found that for 3 data sets, the sitting 8 was lower than the other cohorts. So we finally realized that the chair size used for this measurement did not follow the protocol. So the consequences here was we had to adjust the values by subtracting the difference. So this is just to show you that using different steps of validation, you will probably or always find this type of issues. So I will let now Lovemine.
Okay, so if you're in research, you are gonna realize that along each step of your research data, you are going to encounter challenge. And as Isabel mentioned earlier, each of the section that we each covered, like it could be 1 hour's worth of presentation in themselves. So if you are looking for help, this is where the code platform can come and help you. So if you move the next slide, Isabel. So this right here is the aim of the code platform. We're here to help provide resources, be it expertise, technical support, and even methodological tool that can help support you and your team in the implementation management of data-related operation across all phases of your research cycle. So we're here to help. Like if you have questions, please don't hesitate to contact myself or Rita. So we have our contact information in the next slide coming up. But just to give you an example of service that we might be able to provide for you. If you have a grant project where you would need feedback from us to evaluate your data management plan or even help you estimate the cost that would be related to that, we are here to support you. But what we ask you is that please don't come to us the day of. Like it is not enough time for us to do the work, but we're definitely here to support you. So another example surface is if you have questionnaire or CRF that you are looking to develop, even if you have already a draft or not sure where to start, we can help you like in developing your research question, having your objective for your research collection in mind. We can help you refine those questions or even make suggestions of other variables that you need to think about collecting as well. If you're at a phase where you've already have your questionnaire or even started implementing that in REDCap, but you would need us to have a look at your data dictionary, making sure that the variables name are sort of like in a consistent manner, like you're not sure about what the category should be. We can have a look at those documents, like make suggestion of acceptable minimal values that you can add to your data collection, additional validations, skip pattern, those type of things. And also, if it's even like you've already completed all your research data and you are looking to transfer that data over to the biostat unit, but you will need that somebody to take a look, make sure that your data is clean before handing that over to the biostat unit. We can have a look at those data set, clean it for you, making sure that we are taking care of those outlier, cleaning the data so that it can be ready for analysis. And even if it's that you already have somebody on your team who can do analysis, but you feel like you are very independent and that you're able to handle like either the development of your instrument, but you just need access to REDCap. This is also a possibility where we create a blank project for you and we hand that over. Sorry, so you can do your own programmation. So our services are pretty flexible. So the more you come to us for support, we can better identify what is it that people at the RI community need, and even on our end, so that we can help improve your service, make it available to you. And like as I said before, in the next slide, you'll see our contact information. If you have questions, please don't hesitate to contact us, and we look forward to hearing back from you. Thank you.
Thanks. Any comments, share problems you faced or questions for us? I don't see.
No, for the moment, but I think it was a very good presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other question from anyone in the chat? I don't see anything. I don't see, because I'm still on the share screen, so I don't know if I have any that are raised? No, I don't see that. Okay. Oh, thanks. Thanks, Susan. Okay. Perfect. Well, so if you don't have any question, I thank you everyone for coming today. And just a reminder that Isabel is working, as she mentioned, as the coordinator also as well. So do not hesitate to reach out to her or to Lovemine also if you have any question to that presentation, but also specific to your project or anything that you want to start or maybe review, or even at the pre-grant stage also as well. Any stage that you are into your study, I think Isabel and the coordinator can provide you support and guidance also through your project. So do not hesitate to reach out to them or to me if you don't recall who they are when the idea pops out in your head. I'll know how to be in touch with them. And I encourage you also to make use of that new platform at the RI. I think it's a great way for everybody to have a great kickstart in a study with quality data from the get-go also. And there's also possibility to review data along the way the project is already started. So thank you everyone and have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you.